Biden says America lacks courage in regard to gun control.
Why are we willing to live with this carnage? Why do we keep letting this happen? Where in God's name is our backbone?
He and former President Barack Obama say the U.S. has been paralyzed by the gun lobby. Republican Senator for Texas Ted Cruz says it's wrong to politicize shootings. He himself a recipient of hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign donations from such lobbyists.
The Prime Minister has discussed changes to New Zealand's gun laws during an appearance on late-night US TV. The government banned military-style semi-automatics and assault rifles in the aftermath of the Christchurch mosque shootings in 2019. Ms Ardern told The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, New Zealanders said never again in response to the terror attack, and politicians responded.
We have legitimate needs for guns in our country for things like pest control and to protect our biodiversity, but you don't need a military-style semi-automatic weapon to do that. And so we got rid of them.
Jacinda Ardern told Stephen Colbert New Zealand's system isn't perfect and there is still work to do. Community leaders are concerned a gang turf war across Auckland is putting people in danger, and it's only a matter of time before someone's seriously hurt. Police have responded to shootings across 7 suburbs, totalling 12 reported incidents since Sunday. Amy Williams reports.
Counties Manukau District Commander Jill Rogers says 2 family homes with no link to criminal activity were among those targeted last night. She says the drive-by shooting started at 6 o'clock when parents were home with their children. Jill Rogers says they're terrified and such violence is intolerable. The police are working with 2 rival gangs to quell the tensions. A police team set up to combat gun crime has seized several hundred firearms since November.
The Reserve Bank has raised its benchmark interest rate by 0.5 percentage point to 2%. The increase was expected and takes the official cash rate to its highest level since mid-2016. It follows a similar-sized increase last month as the RBNZ moves aggressively to counter surging inflation, which is at a 30-year high of nearly 7%. The RBNZ says further rate rises can be expected through the rest of the year. A union delegate says he's pleased that the DHB offer to allied health workers has finally met their concerns. Details of the offer have been sent to health workers this afternoon. PSA organiser Will Matthews says the workers will now be paid above the living wage and can earn more in the health sector than at KFC.
It is an incredible relief for us in the bargaining team that after 19 months of bargaining, including some really grueling periods where we had to slog through this, that we have now received an offer that we can bring out to our members, and we do think that this offer will make a difference.
About 1,000 Ministry of Education staff have been told to work from home after their head office in Wellington was deemed quake-prone. A new assessment has found the Bowen Street high-rise meets just 25% of the new building standards. Mātauranga House, which underwent a $20 million refit in 2017, was previously assessed as meeting 90 to 100% of the standards. Staff will work from home until September. To sport, and the race is on to get Mystics and Silver Fern shooter Grace Nweke ready for a potential ANZ Premiership elimination final. The defending champions have suffered 3 consecutive losses since Nweke was sidelined with an ankle injury. 2 players have also tested positive for COVID. Coach Helene Wilson is hoping Nweke will be able to take the court for a potential elimination final in a couple of weeks, even if she's not fully fit.
But there's been many top athletes in New Zealand sport that have played finals, not been 100%. So if she's cleared by the doctor, she will be playing the elimination final.
The Mystics play the second place Pulse this weekend in a game which could have a major impact on who gets a home final. Veteran triathlete Andrea Hansen is upbeat about her prospects of a 3rd Commonwealth Games medal. The 40-year-old Hansen, née Hewitt, is one of 6 New Zealand triathletes selected for the Birmingham Games, which start in July, alongside Tokyo bronze medalist Hayden Wilde. Hansen will be at her 4th Commonwealth Games, but her first as a mum. While she's optimistic about her medal chances, she says it may not come in the individual event.
I'm a different athlete now, so I definitely still want to be in that mixed relay team for New Zealand and definitely go for a medal. So my goal is to get a medal and do my best I can in the individual race.
And Gemma Lewis has signed on for a second season as coach of the Wellington Phoenix A-League women's team. That's the news.
The Prime Minister has a New York minute.
Predominantly our focus was on issues around climate sustainability, but also the war in Ukraine.
The government's bag of money.
We'll never have enough money. You know, our health system isn't perfect. It needs constant evolution. There's no output. There's no metric. There's no measurement happening.
And Taika Waititi makes Time's influencer list.
Taika is the new Picasso. No matter what he tackles, he brings a sense of fun to it.
It's as good as gold. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint with Lisa Owen next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. From Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel Peninsula, cloudy periods and isolated light showers. Mainly fine for Waitomo, Taumurunui, Taupo and also Bay of Plenty, but there are isolated showers about the Bay of Plenty tomorrow afternoon. From Taranaki to Horowhenua and Taihape, fine spells with an isolated shower possible and then fine tomorrow. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, also for Wellington, clouds increasing, isolated light showers developing by the evening. For Bulla and Westland, cloudy periods with a few showers north of Hokitika, mainly fine farther south. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and central Otago, cloud and isolated showers, but mainly fine in Nelson and inland Marlborough, becoming fine everywhere tomorrow morning. For the remainder of Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers clearing about the fjords by evening and elsewhere tomorrow afternoon. And for Reakohu, the Chatham Islands, showers and westerly gales, both easing tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 5. We'll update you with the latest news headlines at 5:30.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. When in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? The words of an exasperated and angry US President Joe Biden after as many as 19 children aged between 7 and 10 and 2 adults were killed at a primary school in Texas.
Beautiful, innocent, second, third, fourth graders. And how many scores of little children who witness what happened see their friends die as if they're on a battlefield, for God's sake. The parents who will never see their child again, never have them jump in bed and cuddle with them. Parents who will never be the same.
An 18-year-old gunman opened fire in the school before being killed by officers. Investigators say he was armed with a handgun and a semi-automatic rifle. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said the shooter, Salvador Ramos, abandoned a vehicle before entering the school to horrifically, incomprehensibly open fire. One of the adults killed was a teacher. Anguished parents arrived at the school desperate to get their children.
Look for my daughter. I mean, after the shooting, they don't know where she's at. I mean, the list, her name is not here, you know, and we don't know a list of who's gotten flown out, and they're not letting us in at the hospital right now. So we don't know where to go. We need somebody to reply to us, you know, tell us where my daughter's at.
RNZ political editor Jane Patterson is in New York, where she says the news of the shooting broke about midday.
Since then, there has just been wall-to-wall coverage about this shooting. One of the things that people are reflecting on as well is the Sandy Hook killings in 2012, where, again, that was at an elementary school, so bringing all of that trauma back up as well. Of course, there were commiserations and shock expressed by politicians and a number of other people, but then the conversation very quickly turned to gun reform and this issue in the United States that just seems to be so intractable with so many mass shootings, but very little political ability apparently to actually make any changes to it.
So, Jane, obviously the Prime Minister was due to have a conversation with Stephen Colbert on The Late Show, and that's normally quite light-hearted. So how did that discussion go?
Most of it did turn out to be a lot lighter, but the show started on a very sombre tone. And their first conversation was about the shootings in New Zealand, the mosque shootings, and then the steps that the New Zealand government took to prohibit so many firearms, and especially those semi-automatic or military-style weapons. And he basically said, why could you do it? Why can we not? Namaz Ardern said that there was definitely momentum after those shootings in terms of political change. She talked about the gun buyback. She said that was a big part of it, that people had bought them legitimately and they were given the opportunity to sell them back to the government and have them destroyed. But she said, we still have our own problems in New Zealand. And of course, we've just had those drive-by shootings in Auckland overnight. So by no means perfect, but it was a pretty serious start to the show and very, very much reflective of how America is feeling at this stage tonight.
So how is America responding with this tragedy still so very fresh?
President Biden has just arrived back from that Quad meeting in Japan. He said that he found out about the shootings on the 17-hour flight on the way back, and he said, I'm sick and tired of it. We have to act. What are we doing? He reflected on the fact that other countries have mental health problems, other countries have social problems, but it just seems to be the United States that continues to have these mass shootings. Kamala Harris also making a live address to the nation, and again, just shock and anger. I think it's really still sinking in over here. I don't think people can quite believe it. Even just in the last hour, there's been an update on the number of children killed from 18 to 19. It's really just still sinking in, but I think you're going to see some pretty intense and pretty fierce debate over the coming days. One thing, for example, the NRA, of course, the strong gun lobby over here, is due to have a convention in Texas this week. So a call for them to cancel it, not to hold this convention in the very state that this has happened. And of course, in terms of Ms. Ardern's trip, we're hoping to hear or expecting to hear confirmation of a White House visit, hopefully in the next 24 hours or so. And of course, the topics on the agenda would have been trade, China, climate change, all of those, Ukraine, all of those big issues at the moment. But I expect if a meeting does go ahead, this will overshadow all of it. Now, President Biden's been trying for gun control for years through his time as a politician, so he may too be seeking to get him a bit more momentum to break through the stalemate that politics has here in America over gun reform.
Obviously, the President has got a lot on his plate at the moment, Jane. Is there any suggestion that he may travel to this terrible tragedy in Texas, and could that put in jeopardy any meeting with Jacinda Ardern?
At the moment, the only thing I've seen is that he plans to make another address from the Roosevelt Room. I would be very surprised if he did not go to Texas, if he did not go to the scene and go and meet that community and spend some time with the people who are just so traumatised. What this means for the Prime Minister's visit, we do not know. However, if she did have one, it probably wouldn't be in the next few days anyway. It may be a little bit later. So in terms of that timing, it still might be able to happen, but that is still very much in the air.
RNZ political editor Jane Patterson speaking there from New York. It is 13 minutes past 5. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Back home now, and 7 drive-by shootings in one night have Auckland police scrambling to calm tensions and renegotiate a truce between rival gangs. There have been 12 reported drive-by shootings in Auckland since Sunday, but this afternoon police revealed there's likely been more. So far, 0 arrests have been made. Meanwhile, innocent neighbours say they're terrified of being shot as they sleep, with bullets flying far from their intended targets. Nick Trubridge and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
Elf Filipaina's seen a few things. 38 years as a cop, over a decade as a Manukau councillor, a lifetime spent in Auckland's south. But even he admits he's never seen this.
Never ever have I seen the prevalence of the firearm incidents that we had last night. Never. 7
shootings in one night, some linked to a beef between the tribesmen and its former feeder gang, the Killer Bees.
This is a battle for the turf. And what comes with the turf is the ability to do the drugs and everything else, right? So you need to be the one controlling in the area.
So from Mr. Filipaina comes a plea. give up the guns before another gangster, neighbour, innocent bystander is killed on the streets or in their home.
The families of the people who are using the firearms, they need to take some ownership. I know it's going to be hard in that environment, but, take some ownership of trying to get these guns off the street. We need to get them destroyed.
A ceasefire previously orchestrated by community leaders, youth workers and members of the rival gangs is now well and truly out the window. The result? Innocent Aucklanders petrified of being shot in their own homes, some of them elderly, trying to live the quiet life in their twilight years.
Really worried, they're quite nice people, they're quiet, they keep to themselves.
Almost all neighbours we speak to are simply too scared to appear on camera, this Papatoetoe woman saying the gun blast next door had her straight up and out of bed before hearing a vehicle scream off.
What it sounded like was as if somebody was dynamiting in a quarry or something. No, it was that real strong, it just sounded like three noises to me, but apparently it was guns going off.
Over in Flatbush, armed police guard a cordoned-off house on Glen Osborne Terrace as detectives arrive on the scene. A neighbour reveals this is the second drive-by attack on the same home in just a few days. She was putting the rubbish out when a car drove up and opened fire. She bolted to her bedroom and watched the chaos unfold from a window.
I thought it would not be where I can get shot, so I came in and I looked through the window. And he came out just as I got to the window and he was saying, my family or my kids live here, like he was yelling to either somebody that he was talking to in the house when he walked out, or he was hoping the person that was shooting at this house would hear it, I think.
She tells us she personally isn't fazed, saying it's normalised in parts of Auckland she's lived in, but she does fear for the safety of the kids living across the road.
I rang the police because I thought there was some kid shot. Not because I thought that they were shooting at his house. I thought they were shooting the kids that are in his house.
Next door, there's evidence of shots landing far from the intended target. We stopped by a house across the road from the Flatbush property in question. I'm standing next to one of the neighbours' vans. You can see a bullet has ricocheted off the van and over into the garage. From the garage, it's gone through the door and the neighbour says into his bedroom. The 7 suburbs hit on Tuesday are Otara, Papatoetoe, Flatbush, Papakura, Te Atatu, Henderson and Mount Albert. It follows 4 separate drive-bys over the weekend, a total of a dozen in just a few days. But Superintendent Jill Rogers concedes that's not a true picture.
There seems to be an acceptance within our community that gun violence is acceptable. We know there are more events that have occurred and we encourage the community to come forward and tell us about this activity before a life is lost.
While some of the shootings are connected to tensions between the rival tribesmen and killer bees, some addresses appear to have no gang links whatsoever. Meanwhile, police are attempting to restore a truce between the gangs. Have you actually met with any leaders of the respective gangs?
We have a number of sort of routes that we can access into that. So from an investigative point of view, we have staff investigating the offences, but we also have our gang intelligence units who continue to liaise with the gangs involved.
Efforts are also being made to seize weapons, but the superintendent not keen to say how gangs continue to stockpile arms in the first place.
Where are their weapons? Where are their weapons coming from, Jill? Just quickly, where are their weapons coming from?
Thank you.
In the meantime, the innocent continue to live in fear, terrified of being caught in the crossfire of a turf war at boiling point.
And if you were listening to that on radio, the full video version of that story from Nick and Marika will go on our webpage. The cost of living crisis is about to get a whole lot pricier if you've got a mortgage, and there could be yet more pain coming down the pipe. The Reserve Bank has raised the official cash rate 0.5% to 2% in a bid to reel in out-of-control inflation that it's at a 30-year high. So stand by for retail banks to pass that straight on to customers. The Reserve Bank's also signalled it will maintain its approach of, quote, briskly lifting the OCR. Kiwi Bank Chief Economist Jared Kerr is here to explain what it all means. Kia ora, Jared. How much heat's this going to throw on the cost of living fire?
It's going to throw a whole lot of heat on the fire, not just what they've done today with 50 basis points, but what they've signalled they are going to do. We have a cash rate of 2% today. They're telling us they want the cash rate to be 4% in just a year's time. So there's a lot more tightening coming, and interest rates have a lot further to rise.
Yeah, give us a ballpark. What are people paying now, and what can they expect to pay when they hit that 4% with the OCR?
Well, we've got interest rates of around 5-6% now. We'll have interest rates of around 6 to 7% by the time they deliver that tightening.
And how many homeowners do you reckon are affected by this?
Well, everyone who's not fixed. So there's about 15% of the mortgage book that are on floating, so they get hit straight away. And then over the next year, 60% of New Zealand's mortgage book rolls over. So 60% of mortgages roll over onto new rates. All those rates will be higher than what they were initially put on for.
So the government's $350 cost of living bonus, it's just gone up the pipe, has it?
Well, it's been evaporated in one move today.
Okay, so if you looked at an average mortgage, and I don't know what that is, could you actually give us a real cash amount more that someone would have to pay?
Well, if you've got a $700,000 loan and you've just seen your mortgage rate go up by 2% or more, that's an extra $15,000 a year. So we're talking significant increase in the cost of that mortgage.
I know banks were, subject to tighter lending ratios. They were really looking at people's abilities to repay loans. So do you think that this is going to put some people in real trouble or just squeeze their household budgets a little bit more?
It's going to squeeze the household budget a little bit more. We do have test rates. So when you come into a bank and say, I want a mortgage, we say, well, we're going to test you at 6.5%, 7%. And if you can handle that level, then we'll give you money to that amount. And so people who are currently getting mortgages for 5% are still below that. But that test rate will be tested itself in the next year. So that's when I'm more concerned. In a year's time, we're going to wake up with people who are hitting the test rates.
So this is higher than what you were forecasting, right? The long-term projections for the OCR. Do you think it needs to go that high to achieve what the Reserve Bank wants, which is lower inflation and to kind of get a grip on house prices?
No, I don't. I don't think the cash rate needs to go to 4% at all. I think we're having, a real impact on households today, right now. The cost of living crisis, and now you're adding interest costs as well. I think we're going to see quite a significant slowdown in consumption and consumer behaviour. So I don't think you need to go anywhere near 4%, but it's not about what I think, it's what the Reserve Bank thinks, and that's what they're signalling to the market. That's what's getting priced, and that's what's going to end up in a mortgage rate.
What are the potential consequences of that? Are we staring down the barrel of a recession?
Well, the risk of a recession certainly increases the more we tighten policy. So, it'll be interesting where we wake up in a year's time. If the consumer has managed to hold on, if the labour market is still strong and wages are rising, then we could be in a situation where we get a soft landing. But we're only a few hiccups away from a recession with the rate at which mortgage rates are rising.
And the Reserve Bank makes the comment in its statement that employment is above sustainable levels, borders are open. So what does that mean?
That's an economist's way of saying we're expecting things to mean revert back to something more normal, which is like an unemployment rate of about 4% when the borders open.
So people losing their jobs with higher mortgage rates?
Yes, but not to levels that would correlate with high default rates. If you want to stress test a bank, you stress test a bank with an unemployment rate. An unemployment rate going to 6% is a concern, but an unemployment rate going to 8, 9, 10% is a real worry. There's an exponential correlation with people defaulting and very high rates of unemployment.
Okay, given what we've seen today, the housing market, how much are you expecting this to shave off house prices against what you previously forecast?
Look, we previously forecast house prices to fall 10% this year. there's a good chance they fall closer to 15% on the back of this now. The Reserve Bank really does have their foot on the back of the housing market and wants to push it down to what it believes are more sustainable levels. And more sustainable levels in their minds is a 15% contraction in prices.
Really appreciate your time, Jared. Thanks for explaining that to us. That is Jared Kerr, who's Kiwibank's chief economist. And homai o whapakaro, I'd love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. What difference is that interest rate rise going to mean to you and your family? And also, are you living in one of those neighbourhoods which were, well, close to those shootings overnight? Do get in touch. Text me, Pātui Mai 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Another kāinga ora development has locals up in arms, fearing it could change the character of their neighbourhood. But community representatives in Millwater in North Auckland say there's no NIMBYism in their backyards. Jimmy Allingham reports.
Two-storey townhouses on Bonaire Crescent in Millwater provide an impressive backdrop to the scenic park and children's playground in their heart. But concern is brewing about Kāinga Ora's plans to build 37 two-bedroom social houses on the street.
When I think of 37 houses coming in next door, it actually terrifies me. I don't know why it has to be 37. Why can't it be Kiwi built?
That's Bonaire Crescent resident Sally, who says she grew up around social housing and experienced antisocial behaviour. She thought she'd left that behind.
We bought 3 years ago and we thought we found the perfect place. We had the park across for our kids and our grandkids, and we just thought this was going to be our forever home, and we were safe. I've been really, really stressed out about it, actually.
Some of that concern is fuelled by gang trouble at a nearby Kāinga Ora development in Silverdale. Other residents say they feel ambushed to learn of the development without any warning it was happening. Although not everybody we spoke to today was against Kāinga Ora's plans.
I don't really think it should be a problem. I think that social housing, I grew up in an area which had social housing in it, and it was never really a problem there, so I don't anticipate it here. I'm a little concerned that people are seeing it as a problem.
I'm not really sure what that will mean for the community in terms of the types of people that might be coming into this family-based community.
I think it's okay. Yeah, I think they have the rights to live everywhere like us. Yeah.
More than 2,100 people have signed a petition against the development, and local MP, National's Mark Mitchell, says he's taken concerns to Kāinga Ora officials.
KO came back, sent a letter back to us last week saying that this has been elevated up to senior management and that they're now working through a process and they'll come back to us with their own recommendations.
Mark Mitchell says he can't comment further while that process continues, but he denies opposition to the development is NIMBYism.
No, absolutely not. The whole community recognises if there's a need for social housing inside the community, then all of us want to see that met. So it's nothing to do with that at all.
Hibiscus and Bay's local board chairman Gary Brown agrees it's not a case of NIMBYism.
It's not a case of that. I mean, we have people in our community that are looking for housing desperately. I think there's about 200 families. If we can find housing for them, that'd be fantastic.
He's hopeful Kāinga Ora will listen to community concerns. More than 8,700 households in Auckland are on the waiting list for public housing. Kāinga Ora has been approached for comment.
And Jimmy Allingham joins me now in the studio. Jimmy, you have just heard back from Kāinga Ora. What have they got to say?
As we heard in that story, there's significant concerns from the local community, 2,000 people signing a petition. Kāinga Ora Regional Director Taina Jones says, well, we have 200,000 people in social housing around New Zealand, and it's unfair to say that they necessarily bring disruption and concerns with them and bad behaviour. She also said that about 100 families from the local nearby suburbs, Silverdale, Millwater and Odewa, don't have a house, so these houses are for them. And Kāinga Ora actually, in fact, matches people with the local community, so there's some sort of connection there. She says she's met with locals, she's heard their concerns. She can't comment further about the process at the moment, but she will be keeping community members and locals up to date with what's happening.
All right, we'll check in again, no doubt. Thanks, Jimmy. That's Jimmy Allingham there. e te iwi e haere nei i a checkpoint, a pay offer for health workers that apparently tops KFC wages. Renewed calls for gun reform in the US after another devastating school massacre. And the giant bunch of sunflowers destined for the Ukraine. Homai o whakaro. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme tonight. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Ko Evie Anō tēnei.
President Joe Biden says America lacks a backbone in regard to gun control after the deadliest elementary school shooting in a decade. At least 19 young children and 2 adults have been killed after a gunman opened fire at Robb Elementary School in Texas. The gunman, an 18-year-old, is dead, believed to have been shot by police. Mr. Biden says the US has been paralysed by the gun lobby. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has discussed changes to New Zealand's gun laws during an appearance on late-night US TV. Ms Ardern, who's in New York, told The Late Show with Stephen Colbert that New Zealanders said never again in response to the Christchurch mosque shootings in 2019, and politicians responded. She said New Zealand's system isn't perfect and there is still work to do. Auckland community leaders are concerned a gang turf war is putting people in danger and it's only a matter of time before someone is seriously hurt. Police have responded to shootings across 7 suburbs since Sunday. A top economist says the cost of living will get a lot pricier for mortgagees after the Reserve Bank raised its benchmark interest rate by 0.5% to 2%. The increase takes the official cash rate to its highest level in 6 years. Kiwi Bank chief economist Jared Kerr told Checkpoint those with floating mortgages will see significant increases and that household budgets will be squeezed. About 1,000 Ministry of Education staff have been told to work from home after their head office in Wellington was deemed quake-prone. A new assessment has found Mātauranga House, which underwent a $20 million refit in 2017, meets just 25% of the new building standards. And a child aged under 10 is among the 11 deaths from COVID-19 reported today. One person was in their 30s, while the rest were all aged over 60, including 4 in their 90s. There are 8,150 community cases of COVID-19 today. Those are the headlines. We'll have the latest news and weather for you at 6.
Kia ora rā, e ho nau mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Kei kona a Nona Peltier, mina kaupapa Kai Pākahi. She's in the studio to talk business. Now, Nona, Reserve Bank rights raise the official cash rate. What did it have to say about the economic outlook? Is there more pain down the pipe?
Well, if you're trying to tackle inflation, you would say there has to be a lot of pain to get that under control. The only way that the Reserve Bank can really deal with that is by raising interest rates. The official cash rate moved today to the highest level it's been since November 2016. And that was at 2%. That's where we are now. It was a 0.5 percentage point increase today. That's not going to be the end of it, though. The Reserve Bank governor talked about that in press conference late this afternoon. And he says basically, this is what's going on around the world and this is how they're going to be having to react. And we have a little bit from him today.
The pace of economic growth is slowing, however, globally. There's been a broad-based tightening in global monetary and financial conditions, and this is acting to slow spending growth, accentuated by these high costs of basics such as food and energy staples.
Yes, and I guess that's the real pain part of all of this. With interest rates going up, that's going to cost homeowners more if they're mortgaged. It's going to also cost businesses more as well. And those kinds of costs do tend to get passed on. But when you raise interest rates, you kind of hope it's going to tackle inflation. Whether it does or not, that's difficult to see. Mostly because a lot of our inflation that we've had over the past 2 years has been imported. So, for example, oil prices. There's not a lot that can be done about that. And then the supply chain issues. Well, there's not a lot that can be done about that either. So the Reserve Bank has really no choice but to act now and then act more. We're going to see increasing interest rate hikes. That's what's been signaled. That's what the market's expecting. And certainly that's what's come through in the markets today in terms of our dollar. You would expect higher interest rates. While it's going to hurt homeowners with mortgages, it's going to benefit people with savings accounts because they're going to get more for deposit rates. And if you think about it, our pensioners have been struggling on very low income from deposit rates and so on for quite a while now. And this is going to turn around. So there's always pluses and minuses. But in terms of our dollar, we gained substantially following the monetary policy statement to 65.1 US cents last I looked, and that was from 64.4 just before. Yep. So that's quite a hike. The New Zealand dollar against the Australian is at 91.5 and against the British pence at 51.9. So interesting times in the market, and I don't think that this is the end of it. We're probably going to see some additional increases there in our cash rate. In our value of our currency. How quickly that moves, I don't know. I guess it depends on what the international investors make of what the governor had to say in more detail.
Yeah, okay. Fisher and Paykel Healthcare, right? Full year profit taken a major hit. What's the reason? Because they were doing quite well, weren't they?
Well, they are still doing quite well. So yes, they took a major hit. Their net profit dropped 28%. And normally you would think, oh my, but that's to, $377 million.
This is they make breathing equipment, don't they?
They do, respiratory equipment. So they came off a very big high. Their products have been in demand because of COVID. So revenues also fell 15%. But you'd expect that because the sales figures and profit margins they've been making over the last couple of years have been quite strong. One of the things they do, for example, they sold 10 years worth of hardware equipment in the last 2 years. And with that hardware equipment comes consumables. Now, what they don't know is how much of the consumables, those are the masks and the hoses and so forth, that the hospitals have stockpiled. But they know there's 10 years worth of hardware out there that they're hoping to help hospitals translate from COVID to other kinds of respiratory illnesses so that they can continue to sell consumables, because really that's how Fisher & Paykel makes money. And they make a lot of money. But never mind, the market wasn't really that happy. And the main reason they weren't happy is because, unlike, I guess, some people, we don't know who those people might be, they don't have a crystal ball. So they can't say what's going to happen next with COVID. And the other thing they don't know is how much stock is being held by the hospitals. So because of that, they didn't provide a guidance, and the market doesn't like that. So the share price fell 4%. Yeah, 4%. That dragged down our market. We fell 2/3%. That's a 74-point drop to 11,173, and that's in line. That's not in line with what we've seen in Asia, where it's been mostly in positive territory after quite a lot of stumbles recently. And these are not easy times for anyone. Certainly, I don't have any predictions.
Thank you for the update, Nona. Nona Peltier there with Business. And to some of your feedback now, because we're getting a fair bit of it on the cost of living and these cash rates going up. One listener says it's going to crush business. Stephen's got in touch to say, with inflation at 7%, surely interest rates need to rise another 3 to 4%. And this one, no worries. I spent all my 30s and 40s paying more than 10% interest back to the future. No mortgage, so happy with interest rates rising as it helps our saving pot, says Margie in Auckland. And another person says, I think it would be great if house prices fell, especially if it meant that rents would fall by 15% as well. I don't know if you heard Jared Kerr there saying they'd previously forecast 10% drop in house prices. He's thinking maybe up to 15%. David says the other side of rising interest rates is that deposit rates for elderly will rise. This is important as currently the after-tax returns are negative in real terms. And Kevin from Napier's got in touch to say what everyone seems to forget is that the Reserve Bank is only following the direction of the government, or financial direction that the government wants them to take. Simple, really. The policies and practices of this government are why we are still where we are today. Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on on the text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The latest devastating school shooting in the US has led to renewed calls for gun control. At least 19 children and 2 adults have been killed after a gunman opened fire at Robb Elementary School in Texas. It's reignited the debate around firearms legislation, but Conservatives appear unwilling to budge. World Watch's Max Toll has this report.
Why are we willing to live with this carnage?
Much of America is not yet numb to gun violence, but cynical in regard to change. President Joe Biden says the country at times resembles a battlefield.
Why do we keep letting this happen? Where in God's name is our backbone to have the courage to deal with it and stand up to the lobbies? It's time to turn this pain into action for every parent, for every citizen in this country.
Both he and former President Barack Obama say the US is effectively paralysed by the gun lobby. In a statement, Obama directly accusing Republicans of showing no willingness to act in a way that might prevent such tragedies. Democrat Chris Murphy had this reaction on the Senate floor.
Our kids are living in fear every single time they set foot in a classroom because they think they're going to be next. Why do you spend all this time running for the United States Senate? Why do you go through all the hassle of getting this job, of putting yourself in a position of authority? Why are you here, if not to solve a problem as existential as this?
It's not just politicians calling for action. Countless Americans feel the same way as Senator Murphy. Here's Steve Kerr, for instance, the coach of the Golden State Warriors basketball team, speaking before a playoff game this afternoon.
I'm fed up. I've had enough. We're going to play the game tonight, but I want every person here, every person listening to this, to think about your own child or grandchild or mother or father or sister, brother. How would you feel if this happened to you today? We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence. Yeah, go Dubs, you know. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go play a basketball game. And 50 senators in Washington are going to hold us hostage.
Or Fred Gutenberg, the father of one of the victims of the Parkland school shooting, who had this message for Republicans.
What they do, the way they politicize guns and violence, led us to this day where parents, loved ones, who right now have to think, how am I going to plan a funeral?
Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who has made it easier for young people to buy guns in the state, has an A+ rating from the NRA and recently tweeted his pride that no license or training is needed to carry guns in Texas. State Senator Ted Cruz, who has received hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign donations from the gun lobby, had this to say in Washington.
You know, inevitably, when there's a murder of this kind, you see politicians try to politicize it. You see Democrats and a lot of folks in the media whose immediate solution is to try to restrict the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. That doesn't work. It's not effective. It doesn't prevent crime.
Yet, something clearly is broken in America. Guns overtook car crashes to become the leading cause of death for US children and teenagers in 2020. An FBI report released just this week found active shooter attacks have doubled during the pandemic, and school shootings now number an astonishing 27 this year. The president is calling for pain to be turned into action, but for some in America, the freedom to bear arms overrides the freedom of children to be safe at school.
Te Piramia, Jacinda Ardern, is in New York and has made a third appearance on Stephen Colbert's The Late Show. The Prime Minister is in the US for a trade mission and charm offensive, convincing Americans New Zealand is open for business and holidaying. The late-night conversation, though, began on a sombre note as the US reels from yet another school shooting. Stephen Colbert opened the interview by talking about New Zealand's gun laws, which were changed following the Christchurch mosque attacks in 2019. The subject is sure to feature in the Prime Minister's discussions tomorrow when she meets top Republicans and Democrats in Washington, D.C., including Chuck Schumer and Mitt Romney. The full episode of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert will air on Prime at 11 o'clock tonight. It is 5:45. You're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. As the fighting continues in eastern Ukraine, injured civilians and soldiers are overwhelming the hospitals. Some are being evacuated further west as soon as they can be moved. From Donbass, the humanitarian group Doctors Without Borders is running a train which is converted into an ambulance and intensive care unit. The BBC's Jeremy Bowen sent this report.
The ambulances drove onto the platform at the station at Pokrovsk. Slowly the train was loaded with wounded people. The intensity of the fighting means it's running continuous back-to-back trips with almost every bed filled.
My name is Yasser Kamaluddin and I'm the emergency project coordinator.
We're on your train now. It's 8 carriages long, 8 wagons. And we're at the first. And what's here?
So this is the first wagon now because we're going back to Lviv, so that's the tail of the train at the moment. This is the ICU wagon, the intensive care unit wagon. We have 5 intensive care unit beds in this wagon, and it's the highest level of medical care that we can provide on the train.
Albina Jakova, a senior doctor on the MSF train, says she can switch off her emotions when she's with patients, but not afterwards.
It wasn't supposed to be like this. It is something very sad to have in here, in Ukraine, in our country.
So when you trained to be a doctor, did you think you'd be doing this?
I would say never.
Valentina Ivanova, in her 70s, was wounded when her flat in the town of Liman, which is under heavy bombardment, was hit. Her husband, who was uninjured but already bedridden and paralyzed, is still in Donbass. Everything she knew in her life is broken. She mourned Liman's palace of culture, which survived the Nazis and is now rubble, and the swimming pools and schools and the kindergarten where she worked.
My husband and I have lived together for 51 years in peace and harmony, and now it ends so badly. I guess we're running out of time.
We're going past the endless fields and farms of Ukraine. This is an enormous country, and one of the remarkable things since the war began is the way that the railways, it's a very large network, they've kept going. They take a real pride in it. We're just crossing the mighty river Dnipro, as they call it in Ukraine, and we're heading towards the city of the same name, where the train's going to stop and some more wounded are going to be taken on board. This is a remarkable operation here, but as well as that, you know, the organization is part of a pattern that it's merged, that people are now bracing themselves and realizing, and I'm not just talking about doctors and nurses, medics, I'm talking about the generals and the presidents, and not just in Ukraine and Russia, but all the countries involved. They are bracing themselves for a long and attritional struggle with no easy end in sight.
An Aussie artist has started a project to lift the spirits of Ukrainians living in bomb-scarred cities. Jeno McLaughlin is making an enormous sunflower quilt and wants to drape it over bombed-out buildings or train stations or to cover a mass grave. She's already got some quilt patches from around the world but is calling for more, and Jeno joins me now. Hi Jeno, how did you come up with this idea?
Oh, hello. How are you? Well, it started, I'm an artist, and during COVID, I was in my country studio, and I've actually lived most of my adult life overseas between New York and Buenos Aires. And while I was living in Buenos Aires, I met a very extraordinary expat community, and they've sort of scattered to the winds. And one of those people was actually a Russian living in London, and had met a Ukraine journalist who was working with I think it was the cultural ministry in Ukraine, and they wanted some help with mentoring young Ukraine artists. And they were actually running an art competition, and they wanted me to judge it. And I thought, oh my goodness, there was no genre or age, and I tried to graciously say no in 100 different ways, and in the end they didn't actually have anyone else, so I became the judge. And then because they hadn't really done anything like this before, instead of getting images sent to my computer, they said it would just take, a couple of days of my life. And they ended up sending me 30 or 40 videos of these beautiful artists, like young artists, all between age range of 5 to 20. And they had all the films of them at home with their family, little bow ties, holding up their paintings. And in the end, it was so beautiful. And I got a real sense of how the people lived in Ukraine and their decor on their houses. And they seemed quite formal in a way as well, and just different culturally to me. And anyway, I ended up mentoring them and just giving them guidance, and they were just beautiful. So then fast forward to the war, and I just really started to worry about where the kids were now, and reached out to my Ukraine contact, and I came up with this idea of making patches to send support to Ukraine. And I first of all flagged it with her, is this a good idea? Is it a dumb idea or a good idea? And she said, no, it's a great idea. And then ended up getting patches from all over the world. And we're sort of sewing it together to make a big art installation. I'm calling it a quilt because it's a patchwork, but I see it more like almost like a big Christo thing, wrapping buildings. And it can be used in so many ways. It can be projected onto buildings. People can hold it. They can have artistic performances, sing in front of it. I don't know. It's got thousands of opportunities, thousands.
I'm looking at some pictures of it, Jano, right now, and it's incredibly colourful and bright, and lots of different takes on the sunflower. Can you just tell us a little bit about the theme you chose? Why the sunflower?
Yeah. Why the sunflower? Well, we had to find something that was actually important to Ukraine and easily identifiable. And it's really, I'm thinking, for the children as well, because children don't understand what's going on. Adults don't understand what's going on over there. And I just wanted to find an emblem that was a metaphor for hope, that Ukraine people could really identify. And, coming out of the news footage where the grandmothers early on in the war, giving Russian soldiers sunflower seeds. And when the aeroplane got taken down a few years ago over Ukraine, the Ukrainians planted, fields of sunflowers to plant there. And because also they're a country people as well, they're rural people. They grow sunflowers, and it's their national flower. It's the yellow of their flag. It's the seeds for new beginnings and hope and optimism. And it's also the sun. They're seeing darkness at the moment, and we wanted to give something that when the war is won, and they're absolutely convinced that they're going to win the war, and I'm just hoping that that is going to happen, that they will lay this down. And it's hopeful, it's optimistic, it's joyous, and it's all about new beginnings. And it's like a comforter. A quilt is a comforter. It's like the blanket. It's like, how to sew an American quilt. It's like everyone coming together and showing our love and support to the people of Ukraine. And
Jano, the people who would like to help you with this, maybe make a square to add to it, can you just tell us how they can get in touch with you?
Oh, yes, please. Well, I hope it's okay to give my Instagram. This is the easiest way. My Instagram is @JanoArt, JANNOART. And on that is, on every post I do, I give my postal address. So people just need to make a 30 centimetre by 30 centimetre, we're calling them a patch. It's a square of fabric. You can paint it, sew it, write on it, whatever your artistic ability is. You don't have to be an artist. You can be, we've got little 3-year-old kindergarten children who understand that obviously they don't understand what's going on, but they know enough to know that little children are sad in another country. We're going to make them happy. So they're painting happy pictures. And we've got 99-year-old knitting squares for us. So you can crochet them. I've just received a lot from South Africa and Somalia that, hope projects where people crochet flowers and things.
And some of them look absolutely fantastic. I know there's pictures on your Instagram, so anyone who wants to contribute, they can go to your Instagram, go to Jano's Instagram and check it out. This is this huge quilt that will be sent to Ukraine, and the theme is sunflowers. A remote-operated digger has started work on Christchurch Cathedral today, removing rubble from the historic building. It's a job project managers are describing as a world first and a significant breakthrough in the clean-up of Christchurch's earthquake-damaged cathedral. Adam Burns reports.
The site of the Christchurch Cathedral remains symbolic of the extent of damage caused by the Canterbury earthquakes more than a decade on. But a major milestone has been reached as the operation of a remote-operated digger gets underway, offering project managers uncharted access inside the cathedral structure. Project manager Farron Inglis says it's an important step for the ongoing clean-up.
It's a really exciting day for us because we are actually inside the building, and our operator Vaughan is completely remote inside the middle of the building, pulling out the rubble that has been in there for a number of years.
The job is all about stabilising the cathedral. The digger and digger driver are supplied by ProTrans. Its commercial manager, Simon Gaynell, says they have used remote-operated diggers in other locations in Christchurch, including when demolishing homes on earthquake-damaged cliff faces. He says this is the first time they are aware of a remote-operated digger being used in a heritage building.
We're clearing out all the debris that collapsed during the earthquakes that has been sitting there for 10 plus years. Since then, obviously there's been a lot of pigeons, and there's a lot of pigeon guano that's in there, and obviously the structure is still unsafe. So we worked with CCRL to come up with a solution to, limit people's exposure both from structural collapse and from guano.
ProTrans excavator operator Vaughan Breen has one of the more important duties of the project. Mr Breen operates the remote digger from a small operations office near the cathedral site and is tasked with both the removal of the rubble but also heritage items of note, including Bibles and significant masonry.
Just clean out the rubble. If I find anything or see anything I think might be of interest, stop and go see the people in charge.
Vaughan operates the digger via screens in a porticom next to the cathedral. He says it's not quite as good as the real thing.
Sitting in a digger, you've got a lot more vision, feel of the digger. On TV here it's like 2D, so you're sort of judging distances is a bit different.
The remote digger has been developed by ProTrans Earth Moving in collaboration with engineering outfit Oricon. Oricon's digital solution developer Simon York says the firms have worked together by using excavators on cliff faces and using drone technology.
They came to us with this challenge of how do they do the remote operation of these diggers blindly within inside the cathedral. So we worked with them to help develop a solution that enabled them to use a camera-based system.
The work is expected to run for the next 6 weeks, and restoration of the cathedral building is expected to be completed by the end of 2027.
A lot of you getting in touch about our earlier story about Kāinga Ora housing in Millwater, north of Auckland. Some people objecting to it. This person says, with regards to the Kāinga Ora story, it's happening in many places, and I think much of people's concern lie with the intensity of the Kāinga Ora dwellings in a given area and the organisation's appalling reputation for dealing with disruptive and antisocial tenants. Susan's got in touch to say, nowhere have I heard anyone objecting to social housing say that they would welcome these new neighbours and try and get to know them and make them part of their community, which may lessen their impact, but maybe I'm just a little too optimistic. And Tricia from Auckland says it's sad to hear Kiwis so opposed to the right for a home at all. What do they want? Ghettos. On the subject of rising interest rates, Daniel's got in touch to say this was easy to forecast, have planned for this inevitable scenario. Those who bought in the overinflated market should have expected such a thing to happen.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Kia ora tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. President Joe Biden has called on the US to turn its collective pain into political action following the deadliest elementary school shooting since Sandy Hook in 2012. At least 19 children and 2 adults have been killed after a gunman opened fire at Robb Elementary School in Texas. Yet Republican State Senator Ted Cruz says gun control isn't the answer. The BBC's David Willis reports.
It is enshrined, of course, in the United States Constitution, the right to bear arms, and in places like Texas, for example, they regard this very seriously. They don't want to give up their weapons, and there is a familiar pattern to all this in the wake of a mass shooting. There's inevitably hand-wringing in this country, earnest calls for tighter gun control laws, but political gridlock inevitably stymies any such efforts, and the matter simply goes away, really, until the next shooting.
The Finance Minister acknowledges an increase in the official cash rate will put more pressure on mortgage holders, but he's confident the economy as a whole will hold up. The Reserve Bank has raised its benchmark interest rate by 0.5 percentage point to 2%. It takes the OCR to its highest level since mid-2016. Grant Robertson says the increase was expected.
This is the situation now where monetary policy is doing its bit. Households will need to manage that. It will be challenging for some of them, but balance sheets across the economy remain fairly strong. People are in work and the economy is in a position to be able to get through this period.
Grant Robertson says the country's financial stability is strong and healthy. National Party leader Chris Luxon says a shooting spree in Auckland last night clearly shows more needs to be done to stop the use of illegal weapons. Shots were fired in 7 drive-by shootings in Otara, Papatoetoe, Flatbush, Papakura, Te Atatu, Henderson and Mount Albert. Mr Luxon says levels of violent and gang-related crime are both up. He says action is urgently needed.
One is making sure we have firearm prohibition orders with warrantless search powers to go after illegal guns, because illegal guns is what's the challenge here. The second thing is I do think we need a dedicated gang unit, a permanent gang unit, that actually deals with any gang infringements and follows up with them.
A union delegate says he's breathing a sigh of relief that DHBs have finally offered health workers pay that meets their concerns. Details of the DHB offer and a summary of previously embargoed Employment Relations Authority recommendations have been sent to workers this afternoon. PSA organiser Will Matthews says all allied health professionals will be paid above the living wage and can earn more in the health sector than at KFC. He says after 19 months of bargaining, they've received an offer that will make a positive difference. About 1,000 Ministry of Education staff have been told to work from home after its head office in Wellington was deemed quake-prone. A new assessment has found the Bowen Street high-rise meets just 25% of the new building standards. Ruth Hill reports.
Mātauranga House, which underwent a controversial $20 million refit in 2017, was previously assessed as meeting 90 to 100% of the standards. However, that's been dramatically cut in the latest engineering assessment due to new guidelines on concrete floors following the 2016 Kaikoura quake. Other government departments have been forced out of their offices for the same reason, including Parliamentary Services, Inland Revenue and the Ministry for Women's Affairs. A spokesperson says staff will work from home until September.
Residents on a northern Auckland street are concerned about a kāinga ora development they say has been dumped on them with little warning. The government housing provider proposes building 37 two-bedroom social housing units on Bonaire Crescent in Millwater. More than 2,100 people have signed a petition against the development, and the local MP, National's Mark Mitchell, has taken concerns to kāinga ora officials. Kāinga ora says it's listening to these concerns, and the houses are to meet existing need in the community. And the use of a remote-operated digger inside Christchurch's earthquake-damaged cathedral has given project managers the chance to pursue significant heritage items. The digger has started moving rubble from the building's interior today, the latest stage of ongoing work to restore the historic building after it was significantly damaged during the 2011 Canterbury earthquakes. Project manager Farron Inglis says access to the interior is significant and could unearth items of note.
There could still be a couple of discoveries there. You know, there's an unknown element of the interior that we need to get inside and actually have a bit of a look at. We've flown drones through and we've assessed the building and we've assessed the structure, but we do need to get inside.
The work is expected to run for the next 6 weeks and is the final stage of stabilising the cathedral. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Thomas Hamill, Director of Connecting for the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra. That's connection as in connecting with an audience. Anya Upstill and Jess Ducey have the lowdown on Wellington's inaugural Queer Arts Festival. Nick Tipping's keeping it Kiwi on Inside Out. And this week's Hump Prize, Tussock, the photography of Bruce Hunt. Listen out for the High Country soundbite on Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. From Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel Peninsula. Cloudy periods and isolated light showers. Waitomo, Taumarunui, Taupo and Bay of Plenty, mainly fine, but isolated showers about the Bay of Plenty tomorrow afternoon. From Taranaki to Horowhenua and Taihape, fine spells with an isolated shower possible, and then it's fine tomorrow. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Wellington. Clouds increasing, isolated light showers are developing by the evening tomorrow. For Bulla and Westland, cloudy periods with a few showers north of Hokitika, mainly fine farther south. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and central Otago, cloud and isolated showers, but mainly fine in Nelson and inland Marlborough, becoming fine everywhere tomorrow morning. For the remainder of Otago, Southland and also Fiordland, showers clearing about the fjords by the evening and elsewhere tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, showers and westerly gales, both easing tomorrow. It's 6 minutes past 6. We'll update you with the latest news headlines at 6:30.
Nā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A new pay offer could see allied health professionals get paid more than a KFC worker, according to their union. The workers are basically everyone outside of doctors and nurses, so anaesthetics and lab techs, dental assistants, drug and alcohol counsellors and pharmacists, to name a few. And last week, about 10,000 of them went on strike over stalled pay negotiations with the DHBs. But the latest pay offer has been made public this afternoon, and PSA organiser Will Matthews is here to talk us through the details. Will, overall, are you happy with this?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yeah, we are happy and we are relieved that after 19 months of gruelling negotiations, we finally have an offer that we can take out and recommend to our members.
Give us the highlights.
This offer delivers a 5 to 17% pay increase to our members, with more to come on the horizon thanks to some substantial provisions around pay equity that are also included.
Yeah, OK. Well, can you give us a real-world example then? Who's going to get the higher end of the spectrum and what's it going to mean to their wages?
Yeah, so our lowest paid members will benefit the most. Those are people like dental assistants, sterile sciences technicians, Hawaii Māori workers. And what that is going to see is all of our members paid at least 5% above the living wage. And that is going to be a huge change for them. So it means they won't have to work second jobs. They can cut down on the amount of overtime. And because those roles will be more attractive now, their vacancies will go down too. And that will be better for their health and well-being.
Well, how many of those people on the lower end of the pay spectrum were on or are on minimum wage, do you reckon?
Oh, that's a good question. I couldn't give you exact numbers, but anyone coming in on an entry level in those professions would be put on the minimum wage or a rate just above the minimum wage.
OK, so where will this deal put them in relation to the example you have cited, which is a KFC worker?
So this deal will put them about 5% above the living wage, which I understand a number of retail and fast food workers are currently on.
And what about back pay?
Back pay, yes. So part of this offer includes that pay increase of $5,700. That includes two payments of $2,800 and $2,900. One payment is back paid to the 1st of November. The other one is back paid to March this year.
Why did it take so long to get here?
Look, we want to acknowledge the DHBs for making this offer, but we also want them to, as we move into Health New Zealand, have a very close look at their internal processes and attitudes, which has led not only to us having to take strike action to get to this offer, but has also led to a massive breakdown in trust between them and 10,000 of their employees.
What attitude, Will, are you referring to?
Yeah, so I think members have just seen for the last 19 months that all of the talk about their value, especially as they have shepherded us through 2 years of a COVID-19 pandemic, has really just been talk. The DHBs have not been able to back that up with a fair pay offer until now. And that has had the opposite effect. It has made our members feel undervalued, angry and frustrated and fed up at being underpaid, overworked and under-resourced.
So what is your recommendation to the membership then, and when will they make a decision by?
Our recommendation is that members accept this offer because of those pay increases, because of those substantial pay equity provisions, and also a number of other changes to their terms and conditions that will address key issues like workplace safety and workloads. They will begin voting on that in 2 weeks, and we will have an outcome by the last week of June.
And before you head off, you've referenced a couple of times pay equity, obviously being dealt with as a separate issue. Deadline for that?
Correct. So we will now enter into separate pay equity negotiations. As part of this deal, we have reached agreement to sign an MOU on those negotiations, which contains a commitment to wrap them up by April 2023.
Thank you for joining us. That is PSA organiser Will Matthews there, and that union is recommending that allied health workers accept the latest offer from the DHBs. America is reeling once again after a school shooting left 19 young children and 2 teachers dead in the state of Texas. The gunman was an 18-year-old man who was himself shot dead by police. The tragedy comes less than 10 years after the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre in November 2012, which left 26 people dead. The horror has reignited calls for gun control in a country that's historically been resistant to change. The BBC's David Willis reports.
Every parent's worst nightmare a reality once again in the United States. In the final week of the summer term, a student at a suburban elementary school, wielding weapons he bought on his birthday, barricaded himself inside the building and went classroom to classroom on a killing spree. 18-year-old Salvador Ramos was himself shot dead by law enforcement officers, but not before he'd inflicted the deadliest shooting of its kind since the Sandy Hook massacre nearly a decade ago. With flags lowered to half-mast at the White House and other public buildings as a mark of respect for the victims, President Biden declared himself sick and tired of the carnage caused by gun violence and called out one of the country's most powerful lobby groups.
As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done?
As word of the massacre spread, a senator representing the state in which the Sandy Hook massacre took place pleaded with his colleagues for tighter gun controls.
But I'm here on this floor to beg, to literally get down on my hands and knees and beg my colleagues. Find a path forward here. Work with us to find a way to pass laws that make this less likely.
Yet despite enjoying bipartisan support at the time, a bill that would have tightened America's gun laws in the wake of the Sandy Hook massacre failed to garner the votes it needed to pass into law. And there remain those who bitterly oppose any legislation that could compromise Americans' constitutional right to bear arms.
You see Democrats and a lot of folks in the media whose immediate solution is to try to restrict the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. That doesn't work. It's not effective. It doesn't prevent crime. We know what does prevent crime, which is going after felons and fugitives and those with serious mental illness.
This country has been in the grips of a gun-buying frenzy over the course of the last 2 decades. The number of firearms manufactured here has nearly tripled in that time, and there are now said to be around 400 million guns in circulation, more guns than people. The motive for this latest rampage still isn't known. Meanwhile, the National Rifle Association is due to hold its annual meeting in Texas this coming weekend.
Joining us now from Uvalde is KHOU 11 news reporter Anayeli Ruiz. Thank you for being with us. I know you've been at the school for most of the day. What can you tell us about what is happening there?
Just a terrible tragedy out here. You know, investigators are still trying to
determine how this guy was able to go to an elementary school and just kill so many people. The death toll just keeps rising. Right now, we know that 19 children at least and 2 adults were killed today in a mass shooting at a local elementary school here in Uvalde, Texas. Parents have been waiting for hours to try to confirm if their kids were the ones that were killed. They've been kind of moved to a community complex and have been waiting for news. Parents had to submit pictures of their kids, and they also had to submit a DNA swab. And slowly, parents have been coming out of the Civic Center, wailing, crying, weeping, as authorities obviously confirm that their kids are among those who have died. And it's just a terrible tragedy. This is such a small community. Everyone knows everyone, as you can imagine, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, we're talking about 3rd graders. These are kids in elementary school still, enjoying life. This is actually their last week of school, and these kids are ready for summer, and just an absolute tragedy out here.
And what do you know so far, Aniele, about the shooter?
We know that the shooter was killed when investigators went inside the school. We know that he actually went and shot his grandmother first and then opened fire. We know he is a teenager here from this area. Investigators are still trying to comb through the social media, anything to kind of give them some kind of information into what happened or what was going through his head. He's an 18-year-old who's been identified as Salvador Ramos. And again, he's a local student, high school student from this area.
Were there any red flags about him, and how planned does this appear to be?
They still have not been able to give us any information on that. Again, they're still kind of combing through any kind of possibly social media post, anything that might have been given them some kind of clue into what he was doing today.
Also, can you just explain to us, with an American school like this, can anyone just walk through the front gate? How does it work?
Normally, you cannot walk through the front gates. Most of the time, most schools have one front door, and you have to walk in through the front door to be able to get into the school. And so it's still unclear how he was able to get through that door and how he got to this classroom specifically. So again, we're just waiting for investigators to be able to provide us. But we know, we're talking about the FBI. We're talking about local state agencies as well as the ATF. Just so many federal agencies are out here right now trying to help, because you have to remember this is a small police department who doesn't really see things like this. These are just a small little town of probably over 18,000 people maybe.
I understand this 18-year-old was wearing body armour, and what do we know about the weapons he had?
We know that he did have possibly a handgun and maybe a rifle when he opened fire. We know that also officers, Border Patrol, we have agents who protect our border here, and those agents did respond to help officers. And we also know that one of these Border Patrol officers was shot in the head by this guy.
And has he got any connection to the school?
To the school?
Yes, the shooter.
We believe maybe his grandmother might have worked there. We're not really sure. Again, we're just trying to still confirm everything from investigators. They've been pretty tight-lipped I think the priority right now was definitely trying to identify these victims. There's just so many. And again, these are elementary school kids. And just for investigators, I can't even imagine. For investigators to have to ask parents for DNA evidence just really makes you wonder what kind of damage this person did to these kids.
It must be absolutely excruciating for these parents waiting to find out what the fate of their kids is.
It really, really is. The anxiety that these parents are feeling. I mean, I've talked to several of them, and they have been calling hospitals, driving all over the place. They don't even know what to do, but they're saying they're willing to wait as long as necessary to find out any information on their kids.
Ana Yali Ruiz, thank you so much for joining us, and our sincere sympathies to your community. And that was Ana Yali Ruiz joining us live from Uvalde there. She's a KHOU 11 news reporter, has been at the scene of that mass shooting since earlier today. And I think it's about 1 o'clock in the morning there now. It is 6:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. 15 gamers have been named in the E-Blacks, New Zealand's first esports rep team. Esports will be a pilot event at this year's Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, with aspirations to becoming a full medal discipline at the 2026 Games. Felicity Reid reports.
With reaction times similar to a Formula One driver and heart rates that spike as the action peaks, esport players need to use their minds and their muscles to succeed. Gamer and Girl Guide leader Lucy Tam grew up cultivating her strategic mind with puzzle books. The 31-year-old has been named as co-captain of the Battle Arena game Dota 2 women's team for the Commonwealth Esports Championships. She says recruiting for the New Zealand team wasn't easy. However, there is a separate women's competition at the championships, and Lucy says this provides a safe space for women to develop their skills.
When you say competitive, a lot of women get put off, and then they'll just straight away say, "Oh, I'm not good enough," and I'm like, "Oh, you don't need to be good. Like, we can show you how to improve and everything." I think it's just taking that step. Everyone's quite scared, but luckily we found some girls who are very open-minded.
While Lucy admits her mum is a bit confused about what her selection for the E-Blacks means, e-football player Josh King had to stop his mum spilling the beans too early.
She wanted to go and share the news online and it to all her different friends and family, but I just told them just wait, and they should be posting all over Facebook by now, I'd say.
King will be competing overseas for the first time, and he says esports players aren't immune from pre-match jitters when it comes to big games on the world stage.
I've played at LAN tournaments, I've played here in the LPL studio, but having a crowd in there is going to be a different ball game, so it's a bit exciting really. That's kind of what you dream of.
High Performance Sport New Zealand is backing the country's first esports high performance program to the tune of $5,000 to help better understand what makes an elite esports athlete. The Chief Executive of New Zealand Esports Federation, Jonathan Jansen, says the players will undergo physical and skill tests and work alongside people who help to prepare Olympic athletes.
You look at the 1920 Olympics and you compare any event to the current day Olympics, and it's just night and day in terms of performance. And a lot of that is due to high performance structures. And so in the world of esports, with this exploding popularity, massive amounts of audience and money behind it, how do we set New Zealand on that stage? And so the fact that high performance sport got involved is already putting us ahead of the pack.
21-year-old semi-retired competitive gamer Patrick Gleeson will be New Zealand's first national team coach. He'll guide the players who will compete in the 3 chosen esports games, Dota 2, eFootball and Rocket League, a point-scoring game that is a combination of football and cars. Gleeson sees his role as being similar to the other coaches who will be at the games.
A lot of it is the small nitty-gritty things. There's a lot of specific things for each game, like you might have to create a specific play or a specific strategy, but a lot of it can also come down to more traditional coaching role, like sleep, communication between players, like sorting out team disputes, also diet, stuff like that.
Esports' arrival at a traditional sporting showcase raises interesting parallels for New Zealand Esports Federation President Connor English.
One of the things that's particularly exciting about this is my father-in-law Tom Coughlin was an All Black back in the late 1950s, and now his grandchildren and my children could become E-Blacks. So it's quite a turn of events.
The Commonwealth Esports Championships will be played on August 6th and 7th at the International Convention Centre in Birmingham.
A report into Downing Street lockdown parties is expected to be delivered in the UK tonight. The investigation by senior civil servant Sue Gray was launched following reports of multiple rule-breaking gatherings during the pandemic. It's been revealed security guards were laughed at when they tried to stop one of the parties taking place. The BBC's Vicky Young has more.
Unemployment is now down to its lowest level since 1974.
Boris Johnson trying to focus on the positive as he opened this week's cabinet meeting. They've all been defending his behaviour during lockdown, a time when rule-breaking was rife inside Number 10. Panorama has spoken to 3 insiders who attended gatherings in Downing Street. Police have issued more than 120 fines to those who partied here.
The Prime Minister will be disappointed. He's, as you know, apologised for what happened. I think he's popped down there to raise a glass and say thank you to a long-term member of staff who's leaving. And, my view is that none of this should have happened, of course.
Insiders say there were weekly invites to Wine Time Friday in the press office at 4 p.m. and several leaving parties. One went on so late some people stayed the night.
I apologise.
Since December, Mr Johnson has been forced to answer questions about what went on.
I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken.
A lot of these young members of staff from across Downing Street who have been fined feel that they went to these events. They did not think they were breaking the rules at the time because the Prime Minister was at them. Some of the most senior civil servants in the country were at them and were indeed organising some of them.
And Mr Johnson's response to the allegations caused disbelief, according to one staffer.
Why is he denying this? When we've been with him this entire time, we knew that the rules had been broken. We knew these parties happened.
The police may have finished their investigation into partying here in Downing Street, but that's not the end of the matter. A senior civil servant is about to give a much fuller picture of what went on. This is about the behaviour of the Prime Minister and the country's top officials. It's about leadership and integrity in public life. Mr Johnson says he takes the allegations very seriously. So far he's been helped by cabinet ministers staying loyal, even though he's been fined. Has the Prime Minister been honest about partying here in Downing Street? But many Conservative MPs are waiting until they see Sue Gray's report before passing judgment.
Back to the United States now, where a pit bull dog is the sole survivor of a plane crash in Colorado. Incredibly, 7-year-old Charter was found with only minor injuries after the crash. Courtney Yuen has the story.
Someone found Chada wandering around the neighborhood adjacent to the plane crash and brought her to a shelter where they kind of held on to her until they could contact owners.
Chada, a 7-year-old pit bull, is being called a living miracle.
It's my understanding that there were 2 victims in the plane crash, but she belonged to one of them.
Veterinarian Dr. Ashley MacDonald cared for Chada after the pup survived the plane crash in Broomfield on Sunday.
I know that Chada's family loves her so much, and her dad, passed doing something that he loved doing with her. I know that she even had little earmuffs in the plane when they would go up together, which is likely how she got that laceration.
MacDonald says Chada is doing fine, besides some muscle soreness and a gash behind her ear.
She did great in hospital, was so sweet. I was expecting a more critical, mangled patient, but she was wagging her tail the whole time.
Yesterday evening, Chada was released from the hospital.
It just was so incredible to hear that she was kind of like the lone survivor, and maybe it's because she wasn't secured and she kind of got away from the crash. I can't say, but animals are incredible and they do crazy things, unexplainable things.
And MacDonald is glad to have been able to help the family in a small way.
Chada's a happy-go-lucky gal, and we're so happy to have helped her. It's great that the family has a piece of him kind of remaining with her, and she's in great hands, so I think that'll help their healing process.
That is remarkable. Your feedback on the drive-by shootings in Auckland, 7 of them overnight. Mark has got in touch from Northland saying, I'm wondering why the multiple drive-by shootings in Kaikooi on the night of the 23rd, 2 nights ago, has not been reported on RNZ. There are police everywhere in Kaikooi for a change. Actually, our reporter Nick Trubridge did ask about that. The police have said they believe events in Northland may be connected to the Auckland drive-bys, and they're investigating all those incidents collectively at the moment. Someone else says the only person or people who are tolerated to have guns in New Zealand are the gangs. And this one on the E-team going to the Commonwealth Games. So disappointed, Will says, that darts, snakes and ladders and Monopoly haven't made it yet. That is all we've got time for. The Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. Catch up on Checkpoint on Spotify. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up is live in the US for the latest on the Texas shooting and the Prime Minister's visit.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. The National Party leader says the increase to the official cash rate will be worrying news for mortgage holders. President Joe Biden has called for political action after 19 children and 2 adults were killed by a gunman in Texas. A union delegate says he's pleased that allied health workers will finally be paid above the living wage following the DHB's offer this afternoon. And the government has confirmed details of its wide rollout of cameras on commercial fishing vessels by the end of 2024. Those are the headlines.